Imagine a missile so sneaky that by the time you even see it, your command post is already a crater. That's the Storm Shadow, a British-French air-launched cruise missile that's giving Russia nightmares. Let's unravel how it works and why it's become one of Ukraine's deadliest cards. Back in the 1990s, the UK and France teamed up inside MBDA to build a missile that could punch deep into enemy territory without ever begging to be noticed. What they got was a weapon ideal for high-value, deep strike missions. Headquarters, bridges, bunkers, all the juicy strategic targets. Unlike older cruise missiles that might blitz in loud and proud, Storm Shadow was designed with stealthy traits: low radar cross-section, terrain-hugging flight, and smart sensors to dodge air defenses. It's basically the James Bond of missiles. Elegant, efficient, and deadly behind the scenes. Alright, buckle up. Now we get into the juicy engineering stuff, but I promise I'll only bore you with the coolest bits. Storm Shadow weighs in around 1,300 kilograms. Its warhead is no slouch either, roughly 450 kilograms, built with a BROACH, Bomb Royal Ordnance Augmented Charge, design. The idea: punch through hardened or buried targets with a precursor charge, then let the main warhead finish the job inside. Its body length is about 5.10 meters, wingspan roughly 3 meters, and body diameter near 0.48 meters. To get from A to B, it uses a micro-turbo TRI 6030 turbojet, pushing it to about Mach 0.8. Range? Operationally, it's stated to be in excess of 250 kilometers, meaning the missile can be launched from well behind the front lines and still reach deep into enemy territory. For guidance, it's a triple threat: an inertial navigation system, GPS, and a terrain reference navigation, matching the profile of the ground below, help it fly low and avoid radar detection. In the terminal phase, it uses imaging infrared sensors, DSMAC style, to identify and lock onto its pre-programmed target image. One caveat: once launched, it's fire and forget. You can't redirect it mid-flight or recall it unless you consider crashing it on purpose, but that's a bad day. During its final approach, it may pop up a little to get a better view, then plunge down to hit the target. Sometimes it even jettisons the nose cone, so the IR sensor gets a cleaner view. When the first Storm Shadows struck Russian targets, the explosions weren't just military, they were political. The UK's decision to hand over long-range precision missiles was more than an arms deal. It was a signal to both Moscow and the rest of NATO. Britain was saying, we're not afraid to cross the line everyone else tiptoes around. At a time when some allies were still debating whether to send tanks or ammo, London handed over a weapon that could hit deep into occupied territory, even Crimea. That move caught attention in Washington, Berlin, and definitely in the Kremlin. British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace said in May 2023 that the missiles were meant to help Ukraine push back Russian forces in a proportionate way, but everyone knew the message was far louder than that. The policy shift didn't stop there. By late 2024, according to Reuters and the BBC, Ukraine had received permission from London to use Storm Shadows for limited strikes inside Russia. That change reflected a growing Western confidence, or maybe frustration, as the war dragged on. What began as cautious support had turned into open defiance. Now, each Storm Shadow fired carries not just explosives, but strategy. Ukraine uses them sparingly, often in carefully planned operations that combine cheap drones and electronic warfare to blind Russian defenses. It's cost-effective in the most ironic way possible. Yes, each missile costs about £2 million. But if it destroys a billion-pound bridge or a fleet headquarters, that's an incredible return on investment. MBDA, the company behind the missile, has even resumed production in 2025 to replenish stockpiles and supply more to Ukraine. That tells you something. These weapons aren't just powerful, they're proving their worth on the modern battlefield. The UK and France clearly see them as vital tools in the future of European defense. And they might not be stopping there. With Ukraine expected to field F-16s soon, experts from Janes and RUSI suggest the Storm Shadow could eventually be be adapted for those Western jets as well. That would make its deployment faster, more flexible, and harder to intercept. What we're seeing here is the evolution of warfare. It's not about who has the most tanks anymore, it's about who can strike first, farthest, and smartest. The Storm Shadow embodies that perfectly. It doesn't roar across the sky like a fighter jet. It whispers across the radar, flies low, and lands with devastating precision. In my opinion, it represents a new kind of Western warfare philosophy, one based on agility, intelligence, and precision rather than brute force. And that's exactly what Ukraine needed, a weapon that levels the playing field without needing to match Russia's numbers. Today, Russian commanders have learned a simple rule. If the radars go quiet and the night sky looks calm, that's the moment to worry, because somewhere out there, a storm shadow might already be on its way. It's silent, it's precise, and it's British. All of which means it's not the fastest, but it's smart, precise, and sneaky, a combination that gives defenders headaches. When the first Storm Shadows arrived in Ukraine in May 2023, it wasn't just another arms delivery. It was a statement. The UK had just handed Kyiv one of NATO's most precise, most expensive, and most politically sensitive weapons. Each missile costs up to £2 million, so they aren't exactly fired like confetti. These are precision instruments, reserved for targets that truly matter. At first, they came with conditions. The missiles were to be used only within Ukrainian territory, but as Russia ramped up attacks and Kyiv's allies grew bolder, those restrictions began to loosen. By late 2024, Ukraine was reportedly given the green light to use them against targets on Russian soil. That shift marked a turning point in Western policy, one that Moscow definitely noticed. Now, there's a twist in how Ukraine actually uses these missiles. The Storm Shadow was designed for NATO aircraft like the Eurofighter Typhoon or the French Rafale. Ukraine, of course, doesn't have those. What it does have is a fleet of old Soviet Su-24 bombers dating back to the Cold War. So, in one of the most impressive feats of battlefield engineering in this war, Ukrainian technicians managed to modify those Su-24s to carry and launch the British missile. According to defense analysis from the Royal United Services Institute, this involved reworking the pylons and integrating Western avionics with Soviet hardware, a marriage that wasn't supposed to work, but somehow did. The result was an entirely new kind of strike capability. A Soviet bomber launching a Western precision cruise missile, striking deep into Russian-controlled territory. If you told that story 10 years ago, people would have called it fan fiction. Ukraine also developed clever tactics to protect these valuable missiles. Before a Storm Shadow strike, they often launch waves of cheap drones, decoys, that light up Russian radars and force their air defenses to waste ammunition. Then, while the defenses are busy swatting at the wrong targets, the Storm Shadows fly low across the terrain, hugging the ground like a ghost and hitting their objectives with surgical precision. According to the UK Ministry of Defense, this method has been highly effective in degrading Russian logistics and command structures. And the results speak for themselves. One of the first major confirmed hits was the Chonhar Bridge, a critical supply route connecting Crimea to mainland Ukraine. Satellite imagery from June 2023 showed the bridge partially destroyed, cutting off Russian resupply lines to the occupied peninsula. Later strikes targeted the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol, where explosions ripped through command centers and destroyed key naval assets. In another operation, a Storm Shadow strike reportedly killed Major General Sergei Goryachev, one of Russia's top commanders in Zaporizhia. That's not propaganda. Russian state media confirmed his death in June 2023. These attacks forced Russia to relocate its logistics hubs and headquarters further from the front, stretching supply chains and slowing their response times. In effect, the Storm Shadow turned distance into Ukraine's new defense weapon. Even without air superiority, Kyiv could now reach deep behind enemy lines and make the Russians feel unsafe in places they thought were untouchable. Now, in my opinion, what makes the Storm Shadow truly fascinating isn't just its technology, but its symbolism. It represents how warfare itself is changing, not with massive tank offensives or air superiority, but with precision, stealth, and intelligence. It's a kind of quiet warfare where one perfectly placed strike can do more than 1,000 artillery shells. And Russia knows that. Every time a Storm Shadow is launched, there's a ripple of panic across their command networks. Not because it's fast, but because they don't know when or where it's coming.